This one's a very special conversation because we've been talking about the consumer sentiment post GST 2.0 on our special consumer consumption sentiment. We have Sanjiv Mehta, the executive chairman at Catterton India, but more importantly, former chairman and CEO at Hindustan Unilever. Mr. Mehta, you've seen it all. You've seen the first GST, you've seen demonetization, you've seen the pandemic period, you've seen so many regimes and their impact on consumption. So with your experience, how would you rate GST 2.0 as a catalyst to boost consumption? And with the freedom that companies have been given right now to pass these prices on dynamically in the absence of the anti-profiteering law, how do you think this would catalyze volume growth? Analysts expect anywhere between 3 to 5% incremental volumes. What would your experience say?
Yeah, thank you, Mangalam. Delighted to be on your channel, and my greetings to all of your viewers. If we just, Mangalam, for a moment step back and look at the construct of Indian consumers, you have about 3% of the households who I would say have the purchasing power of the West. Then you have about 11% who are the classical upper middle class. Then you have about 30% of the households which are lower middle class or the archetype middle class, people who are striving hard and moving from very clearly from needs to wants. And then you have a large percent of India's population, which is over 50%, which I would still classify as within the Indian construct bottom of the pyramid, though they are not today people who go hungry, but their household income would still be less than 300,000. Now, in the last couple of years, many things have happened. First has been the disruption of COVID, followed by huge spike in inflation. And during the period when you had about 2 years of massive inflation, then obviously at that stage, the volume growth came down because most of the companies, they had to take the price up to protect the business model. Then we also had a period when the agri growth was very tepid. There was a year when it was less than 2%. That took a huge toll on the purchasing power of people living in rural India, especially those dependent on agriculture, which we are talking about nearly 45% of the national population. Now, when you put all these things together, it is not surprising that there was a stress on consumption. But the good bit has been that despite all this, if you look at the volume growth in the industry today, certainly in the categories where I led the business, there we are seeing volume growth of in the vicinity of 6%. Now, 6% from a global standpoint is not a bad picture at all. Yes, after the high period of inflation, the price growth has now disappeared. That's in many ways a good thing because the incremental inflation has not been very high. So your entire top line growth was driven more or less by volume growth. And now we are talking about the government stepping in to give a huge advantage in terms of GST reduction. Now, we must remember that a few months back, the corporate tax rates had come down. Now, corporate tax rate, of course, is not going to impact the people in the bottom of the pyramid because their incomes are low and they are not in the tax bracket. But certainly the middle class was given a boost. And here you have now a big step taken by the government to rationalize GST and give a huge benefit to consumers. In many categories, the tax rates have come down from 18% to 5%. I think the first thing that consumer goods companies should do is they should pass on the benefit to the consumers.
Sure.
This is not something that they should look at to fix their business model or increase their gross margin. They should pass this benefit to the consumers, and that would give a further fillip to the people at the bottom of the pyramid whose real wage growth had not kept in tandem with the inflation.
Right.
Sure.
And the huge
Mr. Mehta, how much do you think would it mean in terms of incremental volumes were the companies to pass on these cuts immediately to consumers in your experience?
You know, it would be very difficult because each category has different nuances. Each category, the impact would be different. But if you were to look at that the benefit runs into over 40,000 crores, and if a large part of that is passed on to the consumers, I wouldn't be surprised if an equivalent amount of growth happens from a perspective of the consumption going up.
Sure.
But there is also one very important factor which we should never forget, which is the behavior aspect, or what I would call as the consumer confidence. When times are tough, people hold back spending money. When they look at that the government is taking series of steps, the inflation has come down, they would become much more liberal in spending. And when we talk about consumption, Mangalam, it plays in different ways. You know, when you are at the bottom of pyramid, when times are good, every member in the family may want to have their own bar of soap. When times are tough, they might step back and say, the whole family will just consume one bar of soap.
Sure. Mr. Mehta, you know, that's exactly where I just wanted to get your opinion about the consumer confidence. While we do have this rationalization which has come through with regards to GST, on the other hand, we do have the rupee which is depreciated significantly. And we have other factors such as the uncertainty with regards to tariffs. While we have made headway there, there is still the uncertainty with regards to what could happen in gems and jewelry and textiles, and hence the impact on employment as well. In that context, do you think some of the GST fervor and the boost is probably offset by these factors, by these negativities?
You know, again, we must remember that India is not a homogeneous country. Yes, there would be workers in the diamond industry who might get impacted, but they would still be a small part of the total consumption base. A large part of the consumers in the country are going to get the benefit of GST reduction. I'm assuming that the companies are going to pass it back to the consumers. So certainly there will be a fill-in, no question about that. Of course, there is an overhang. And then we must look at it from different lens. If the stock market doesn't go up because FII is not coming in, that certainly has an impact on the consumer confidence. But just look at it. We are talking about more than 50% of the households in the country in the bottom of pyramid, less than 300,000 family income. They would get a benefit. There's no question about that.
Sure. So, quick one. I just wanted to understand, what would be the main hurdle that comes in, right, to get into this transitioning phase for companies? And would we, even if they pass on the benefit, I don't think that it would be fully, right, that they would be able to pass on. If it's moved from that 18% to 5%, how are they going to be passing on that full benefit? Will it be full, or will it be through some distribution side of challenge or discounts that come in on that front? And look at categories like soap, right, where we have competition, high penetration. Why do they need to pass it on that time?
Look at it from this lens, that if your input tax doesn't exceed the total GST that you would be paying on the output, then the whole benefit flows down to the companies. And there would be a moral responsibility to pass it to the consumers. And you must also remember that these are very competitive categories. And if your competitor reduces the price and you don't reduce the price, you would become uncompetitive. So the sheer competition will also force the companies to pass a large part of the benefit to the consumers.
Right. Mr. Mehta, just one question before we let you go, and this is beyond GST and perhaps on the future of, the new leadership at Unilever. You've worked with Priya before. Your thoughts here, and obviously, you know, the global leadership also focusing on India, saying that not more capital would be deployed outside of growth markets, and one of their biggest growth markets is India. Your thoughts?
You know, India is the second largest market for Unilever. And when you look at it from a valuation perspective, India is the most valuable country for Unilever. So I'm not surprised that Fernando is focusing on India and the US. Those are the right calls. And as far as Priya is concerned, I know Priya well. I'm very confident that she's going to do a great job.
Okay, all right, Mr. Mehta. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining in and speaking with us. And I'm sure we'll definitely get you back on post the 22nd of September as well to get an assessment in terms of how things are panning out on the consumption front. As of now, we need to take a short break. We'll be back with more news. Stay tuned.